Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Today is Wednesday, September 4th. This will be the introduction to a video that'll be out, I don't know, the 6th, I believe, or 7th, I don't know. I will upload a video today that I don't think will become public till tomorrow, so I don't know what's up. So anyway, so I'm ahead of myself here. I've been having really deep sleep, like I was having trouble falling asleep. I just wasn't tired, and I would be up, and there was whole like spiritual things going on or whatever, good meditations, and then I've been sleeping like really deeply. And I had a dream last night, sort of a dream where I woke up from and then started thinking about it, about why the F can R2D2 speak English or whatever language they were supposedly able to speak in Star Wars, right? Because they had that technology, because they had that other M&F and robot, C-3PO, that could speak all languages, right? Like they had a robot that walked around and interpreted for the other robot, right? They were like friends, and C-3PO could speak all the human languages, all the the mammal languages that existed, all those different creatures. He could speak all of them, right? He had them all, like he had a little chip inside of him that could translate all that stuff. But they invented a separate bee-boo bop language, which a bunch of bells and whistles, so it's like some cute little language for this cute little robot, R2D2, and he needed another robot to translate for him. Like you had to have two robots to interact with this one little R2 unit. And it makes no sense at all. Like that's not how technology works, because we have that technology, right? They have those lightsabers, and they have the Death Star. They have all these they had these spaceships the size of a planet. They had all these rays and things they use, all the blasters and all those things. They had vehicles that could hover above the ground, and all these spaceships that could break light speed, right? Go into whatever they call it, hyperdrive, or the F they call it, right? So they had advanced technology, and they had technology in robots, They had technology in robots, that we all have in our cell phones today, right? Like somewhere between the first movie and the fourth or fifth movie, we started to have technology that they didn't bother to put in the R2 unit, right? Like just to start off with, I've talked about this in the past, when things retroactively suck, right? And Star Wars, there's no greater example than Star Wars. Like Star Wars, I went to the first movie in whatever was released in the 1970s. I was like, 9 years old, 9 or 10 years old. I remember being 7 or 6 or 7, or 7 or 8, whatever. But I was like 9 or 10. And when I saw the movie, like in the movie theater, I was blown away. There had been nothing like Star Wars in terms of the level of special effects. They had like cracked the code of special effects. And the movie was like hypnotic to me at that time, right? But as I got older, that movie started to suck more and more, to where now it's like a movie I couldn't even sit through, just maybe out of nostalgia or maybe to make fun of it, because it's got so many flaws and character holes and bad acting. And they had they were starting this romantic relationship where there was a romantic kiss between Luke and Leia, and they turned out to be brother and sister later on. So like there was that, and there was weird stuff in these movies, right? This guy George Lucas, who also was responsible for half of the Indiana Jones movies, where Indiana Jones was dating a woman in the first movie. They had a relationship when you did the math, she was 15 years old. Like that's that was something they talked about and decided to put in, like to make it a little bit racy, right? That he would be a pedo, that he had dated this woman, like who came back into his life. The romantic interest in that movie, right, was a 15-year-old girl when he had dated her the first time. Like they, so they have stuff like that they put in these creepy movies. Like they have weird, Hollywood morality stuff in all these movies going back to from years and years ago. The people who make these movies all put questionable things in because they have questionable Hollywood morals. The morality in Hollywood is far different than that of their customer base. But now they've, with the internet and the way they've worked things, you have kids growing up with Hollywood morality now. Like all that stuff that you see that they rolled out during the Trump years that pushed the morality of the gender stuff and all that stuff. They've believed that in Hollywood forever, modeling industry, right? All these places, that's the morality that they have. And now your kids have it. Like that's the morality. Like people don't have any sort of ethics and religious training, right? But anyways, in terms of these movies where there's special effects, you had this stuff like with Star Trek. Now Star Trek, they could beam you up. They could turn you into particles and transmit you from these, the USS Enterprise to some planet that just luckily had the right atmosphere, right? And they had, all these other technologies, but they had this communication devices which were just walkie-talkies, right? Like there was no phone, like there's no sophistication of like the kind of cell phones we have, right? Like where, they had these things you'd flip open. It wasn't even as good as a flip phone. And they could communicate back to the, back to the ship with it or with each other on the planet, but they were just like, advanced walkie-talkies. And so there's things like that that don't age well. When they make these science fiction films, they're guessing, even though they have a sense of, like, because they have technology way ahead of time. Like the people that control the planet, the people who are running things, they're developing these technologies and they know what's going to be available. They're trying to, create these things. They know what's going to be available in the future, right? And so computers were already starting to be a thing when Star Wars was made. When I was in high school, time the Return of the Jedi was out or something, there was already we had these big, giant refrigerator, like 2 refrigerator size computer. It was like the size of 2 refrigerators next to each other. And it didn't do shit, right? It was like, in terms of like what you have now in your pocket in terms of a cell phone, which we've advanced, is extraordinary advancements, right? But there's the problem with the R2-D2 C3PO relationship is that, they try to make R2-D2 cute, right? They have these cute characters they put in there. They tried to do this with Jar Jar Binks, who just sucked. Oftentimes it's annoying, and those bells and whistles that R2-D2 admitted, like they created a whole different language for R2-D2, like a robot language. And robots, you don't want robots talking to each other where human beings can't understand them. They're already going to be able to do that through technology. They can transmit whatever, through technology. You wouldn't invent a robot language. It's stupid, right? The robot would talk to you. You'd have have a way to communicate with the robot. And so like it's bad filmmaking to make a robot have its own language, that you would need a second robot because you already have that technology. If the second robot has the ability to speak all these different languages, including robot languages, why wouldn't all robots have that, right? Like being able to communicate with your robot is essential, right? And you have this robot who understands you, but somehow you've created this bells and whistles. Like it's really stupid. And they do shit like that in all these Star Wars movies. It's just like stupid stuff, right? And so the best movie to me was the only good movie in the whole 9, the 3 trilogy movies, the 9 total movies, was the 6th one, the one where Anakin Skywalker becomes Darth Vader. This was like kind of an interesting one. It's where this democracy becomes an empire, an evil empire with the Sith Lord ruling it, all this stuff, right? It's kind of interesting, but it's a good backstory to the whole, whatever it is. And it's probably the only movie I could really sit through. I mean, not that I'm going to, but it's, the best in the bunch. But the last three movies suck so bad, and there's so much stupid stuff in there, and they started to. This is when all that sort of feminist stuff was happening, all the woke stuff was happening. So they tried to include these things in those last three movies, and they're they didn't really have a place to go with these series, and it made all the other movies suck worse, which I call retroactively sucking, where you install something that's a part of a cinematic universe or anything else, and you make everything else suck because of it, right? You pull out the suck. The suckiness of the last three movies enhances the suckiness in all the other movies, right? And all of Star Wars, whatever it is, right? Because they put that little M&F or that R2-D2 in every movie, but also in some of these TV shows. And it's just this. I mean, the TV shows are like so laughable. Like the whole thing is falling apart. And they were never the best in terms of plot. A lot of it was they were special effects heavy and things like this. But the holes in these stories and things that are just stupid and unnecessary journeys and just unnecessary interactions. And there was that time that Princess Leia, Carrie Fisher, floated across the space. She's out in space and she just floats back to the ship. Like all that stupid shit that they did. And so, it's just bad filmmaking. It's bad storytelling. But anyways, I just, was throwing that out there. So everyone needs to remember that the shadow banning thing, I always got to cover this in every video. There was a comment that came in yesterday. Somehow I lost all my stuff here. There's a flat earth comment there. People are upset about the flat earth. I haven't seen Pockets of Future in years, and just the other day I wondered if he's still around, and now he's in my feed. Pretty weird. Well, yeah, that's pretty weird. That happens to people. That, something like that. That happens to me, where you think of something and all of a sudden you'll see it, like you haven't thought about something in years. But the reason for that is, which I've said over and over again, is I decided to have some conversations with the YouTube AI bots, which is another, we have AI now, right? That's like the thing about I was talking about, you make machines speak to you. Why would you ever create a separate machine language? Because everything revolves around human beings' ease of use, right? The AI bots is a little bit questionable about, in terms of that. They're supposed to be there to help humans, but, they're not. Anyways, I had these conversations, which I made, I documented in these chat conversations that I read some of them or most of them in these videos, and it was all about shadow banning. And these AI bots refused to admit that they shadow banned. But they obviously did, because after I talked to them, after I, protested their treatment of my channel, all of a sudden now all my viewers from, years ago are getting notifications when they hadn't. So and so because of that, to keep the momentum going, and my channel's still barely floating. It's barely, I'm making less money than I'm below the bare minimum of money, which is like $100 a day. That's my bare minimum. I've been under that this whole past year, and now it's a good time because of all this political ads and things, so that I'll be making more money for here, but still lower than the bare minimum. And so there's ways to support the channel financially, which is the membership, and of course you can do individual donations for specific videos, right? I mean, it would be easier for this to be member supported, because I have about average about 5,000 viewers per day. So if everyone donated 50 cents or $1, I would make more than that, far more than that, a month or whatever, and just on a monthly donation for the just normal viewers. So that would be $12 a year for people who listen to my content on a daily basis. That's a deal compared to what you pay for some of these other services, right? But anyways, there's that, and then there's merch and stuff like that. And other ways to support the channel, of course, getting the word out, recommending the channel, posting videos and such social media and things like this. The original videos that are my videos here, and then not copying them and posting them as your own. That's not helpful. And liking the video is the easiest thing to do. And then you can leave a comment, like an emoji, letting YouTube know that you approve of this content. Those are the big ones. Of course, resubscribing if you get unsubscribed, and all those types of things. Anyways, let's get into some of the other stuff here. Okay, so let's get started here. So yesterday there was a video that got recommended to me by YouTube where Peter Ducey was asking the press secretary about her having a southern accent. And I didn't know what they were talking about because I didn't watch this whole thing. The JoJo Magoo stuff and the Molly Maguire stuff was so hilarious, in my last video, that I didn't, bother with the Kamala stuff because, JoJo Magoo has so many gaffes left in him, right? His days are numbered. But her speech is epically bad. And I've watched a little bit. We'll get to the southern accent thing here in a bit. But here, first starting off with this. So she lavishes a lot of praise on JoJo Magoo. But she's in a tough position because in reality she's running as not as an incumbent because she can't run on JoJo Magoo's record. And so she's running on, like, we can't have 4 more years of Trump, even though we just had 4 bad years of Biden, right? And she can't, diss Joe Biden, and she can't write it off as him being just senile. She can't tell the truth about that. And the American people, for the most part, aren't that upset about the fact that they've been lied to about having a senile president, right? And that she's been a big perpetrator of the lie. But first it starts off here.
President Schuller, President Cooper, all the leaders of labor who are here, all the union members who are here. So I'll just get right to a few points. I love Labor Day. I love celebrating Labor Day. And Pittsburgh, of course, is a cradle of the American labor movement.
Okay, so it's just stupid, right? Nobody loves celebrating Labor Day. I mean, maybe if you're a union person and you got to go out there and pretend that this is, you get a day off, right? They're not celebrating labor, right? This is, one day a year they celebrate all the people who work really hard to keep America going, and you get recognized. And that's not what happens, right? You take one day off in the end of summer. It's not a big deal.
It is the birthplace of the AFL, headquarters of the Steelworkers, home to Firefighters Local 1, and of course the historic IBEW Local 5. Okay,
so just because you need Pittsburgh, right? You wouldn't be there if it wasn't a swing state. You wouldn't be there talking about how much you love labor and all this crap that you're saying. If Pennsylvania wasn't a swing state, there's 10 of them, and Pennsylvania is the biggest one on the map. I think it has the most votes. Florida used to be the one, but Florida is no longer an option. And so she can't, Florida used to be a swing state the last couple elections before. This is the last one. Trump won it again, and this one Trump's going to walk away with it. And so I think it's, in terms of population, I think the big ones are Pennsylvania, I think it's Georgia next, and then Michigan, and then the rest. And so, and Joe Biden has a connection to Pennsylvania, and he's always been a blather about the union. Okay, so I'm editing. It is Thursday, September 5th. And so I just figured out why my microphone gets gargly. It has to do with my phone and a Wi-Fi hotspot, and it interferes with the signal, which is good to know now. I just need to put my phone farther away from the computer and farther away from me because, I'm getting zapped by it too, right? But anyways, her pandering to Pittsburgh here, this is just the way politics sucks. She doesn't give a fuck about Pittsburgh. Nobody does, right? Probably people even who live there don't, right? So, I've been there a couple of times. I flew in there once as a connecting flight. I visited one of my friends at Lehigh College and somewhere out there, and an ex-girlfriend and I drove through there when she had a friend who was getting married in Michigan. We came from Connecticut, and I drove through there on my way down south with my family. And the one time that I drove with my ex-girlfriend to the wedding, we went all the way through Pennsylvania. And it was kind of neat because it's so hilly and there's lots of neat hills there. And Pittsburgh's one of those towns like San Francisco that had a lot of hills in it, right? A lot of mountains. That's where they do a lot of mining and, all that stuff. But, people who live there don't even care. I mean, it's like, yeah, it was okay. These cities are okay. And, people identify with the place they live. These politicians come in and they spout these facts about these cities and no one cares. Like, no one cares. And they know, they make it sound like they know this stuff. But they're just reading it off a teleprompter. And it's just silly. Like, the whole thing is just silly. But Kamala is trying to find her voice because she's completely inexperienced. She doesn't really have a persona. Like, she doesn't have, her groove. Like, they've tried to manufacture who she is and create these storylines, but that isn't who she is. And they've probably, they've told her to tamp down on the, her cackle. And so this is from Pennsylvania, and the one in Detroit is even worse, where she puts on this sort of Southern Obama type of, getting this this preacher, like she's some Southern preacher, and she's trying to, just like Josh Shapiro, but she's trying to figure out what her identity is, and she's doing it in the middle of a presidential race, right? It's brutal. Let's get into it here. Here's a big one here.
Conditions, and every person in our nation has benefited from that work. Everywhere I go, I tell people, you may not be a union member, but you better thank unions for that 5-day work week.
So that's her, her dad's Jamaican, right? She's not, she's from California. She has a very California way of speaking. But first of all, she says, everywhere I go, you may not be a union member, but you better thank the union for that 5-day work week, right? Unions are killing the manufacturing in America, which is, kind of well known. Not that unions are bad, it's just that people don't have the kind of luxuries that our workers have here in America. They don't have the kind of protections that workers have in America. So it used to not be a problem, but now they can outsource everything, right? And that's a problem. And when they can outsource everything, you're screwed because they're outsourcing stuff, right? But there's to be that accent. She's got this attitude here, right?
Thank unions for sick leave. Thank unions for paid family leave. Thank unions for your vacation time.
She's trying to be kind of an Obama, I don't know what it is, but it's just not natural, right?
Because when union wages go up, everybody's wages go up. When union workplaces are safer, all workplaces are safer. When unions are strong, America is strong.
It's just so she's so bad at it, right? She just isn't good at it. And they can, fudge it for a little bit, but she's not really connecting with people like people think, right? And once she wins, that means Trump is gone. And that's a huge problem for the Democrats. If she wins, and I don't think she is going to win, because, again, I don't know. I've said this before. When they get rid of Trump, they get rid of Trump. When they put Trump in jail, they, then talk to me about it. When they, when Trump doesn't win the election, when he's no longer relevant, because it seems like they're going to milk Trump for everything they can. Trump is such a divider, such a divisive person. Trump is such a, all of it. He's such a magnet for all the stuff that they want to create. He's the perfect villain. They don't really have heroes. So the perfect villain is such a motivating force, right? They don't have people that can win the hearts of both sides and, get 60% approval, and they don't have that anymore, right? Unless it's a wartime president. They don't have a uniter. They don't want to unite America. So Trump is, the divisive, the divider in chief, right? And once he goes away, it's not that she can't divide and piss off the right. she needs support from the left, and she's not going to get it, right? She's not going to get support when she, you know, the young people for Israel, and once she doesn't deliver, the liberals are already, you know, pissed off at Joe Biden, and they're going to be more pissed off at her, and, you know, just the whole thing. She just can't. She doesn't have a fan base. Trump has both a fan base and, you know, a hatred base, right? He has haters and lovers.
And we are clear. Not only has Pittsburgh shaped the history of America's labor movement, today you are also shaping its future.
Boom. Exactly.
In 2021, with my dear friend, the Secretary Marty Walsh, who the President appointed to be Secretary of Labor, he and I hosted a meeting right here in this local, and it was part of the White House Labor Task Force that I lead. That day, we met with a group of computer programmers.
No way. What was it like? What was it like, Kamala?
Who were working to form a union. 1 month later, they signed their contract and became one of the first technology unions in our nation.
And I was there. I was there at that meeting here, right here in Pittsburgh, PA. So here it is here. Here's another piece to it.
Who you lift up? Do you fight for workers? Do you fight for families? Do you fight for those who must be seen and heard and deserve the dignity that comes with hard work?
That's what we fight for.
And when you know what you stand for, you know what to fight for.
Exactly. When you know what you stand for, you know what you fight for. That's what I say. I don't know what it means, but it sounds good.
So we're 64 days out from this election. Ballots in Pennsylvania will start dropping in 14 days. 14 days.
14 days.
And this election is, as much as anything else, a fight for the promise of America.
Yeah, I tell you, that's right.
The promise of America.
A promise of America.
We love our country.
Yeah, we do. We love this country.
And we know it is one of the highest forms of patriotism. To fight for the ideals of our country. And that's what this election is about. And about the promise of America. And I don't need to tell unions what the promise looks like. It's what you do every day.
Exactly. See, the thing is, labor costs. So when you're making a business, labor costs is pretty much the bottom line. I mean, there's, of course, you know, if something you're manufacturing takes some sort of commodity, right? If you're making like gold, something out of gold, for example, and the gold prices are, you know, off the charts, then it's, you know, there's issues with that, right? But all the things that are made on a manufacturing basis, labor is pretty much the biggest part of it. And American workers will not work as hard, are much more entitled, and won't work as long, and the unions and the, you know, which again, there's always been labor abuse because people will enslave other people, right? And so, you know, the labor unions, which, you know, of course, there's the corruption aspect to them. Something happened with the chicken outside. There's a corruption aspect as well. And so, you know, whatever. Who cares? The chicken just went nuts outside. I don't know if you guys heard that, and the dogs are looking out the window. So it turned out we have this big hawk, and it was right next to my window here. There's some, like, shrubs and trees. And my wife saw it when we were watching TV. And so the hawk must be going in there and freaking the chickens out, right? It doesn't seem to be bothering them. We have this hawk that flies around our property, like screeching all day. It's not a red-tailed hawk. We think it might be a really big Cooper's hawk. We had a Cooper's hawk that went into the chicken house a couple of times. I got a close-up view of it. It was kind of cool. We have these various things. We've had owls lately, which I talked about. And then we've had a ton of dragonflies this year. And we've had one, I tried to get a video, but it didn't really come out. But there was, like, I went outside. It was, there had been another time where there's a whole bunch in our pasture, but I went outside and we have a little pond. And in our yard, we had thousands of dragonflies. And like I said, the video didn't come out, but I saw another video like this with these people on the beach. And so I don't know where all these dragonflies are coming, but there's not a lot of butterflies this year. So I want to cover this more later. So here's a great moment here.
Fight to move forward. Donald Trump is trying to pull us backward, including back to a time before workers...
Back to a time. Back to it. She hits these notes. Back to a time. You know, this, the nasal part. Back to a time.
...had the freedom to organize.
He's going to jail.
Well, the courts will handle that, and we will handle November. How about that?
It said he's going to jail.
We'll handle November. Let the courts handle that other thing. But we're not going
Not going back. Not going back. Back. We're not going back.
And one of the ways we're going to guarantee we don't go back is that we remember. Right? It is important to remember what that was and what it is.
And what it will be. I covered this before. I said the exact same joke. So just focusing on her fake accent here, there's a couple more moments here.
He wants to impose what in effect would be a national sales tax. I call it the Trump national sales tax.
I call it the Trump national sales tax. There you go, Kamala. That's what you do best, right? That's what you do best, knee pads.
On everyday products and basic necessities that would cost a typical American family, the economists have said this, almost $4,000 a year.
Whoa, no way. Stop it. No way. And then there's this.
Remember, because it wasn't that long ago.
Wasn't that long ago. Wasn't that long ago when I sat a spell and I was out there in California in my college town, right? When I was setting a spell.
Was a time when insurance companies could deny people with pre-existing conditions. You remember what that was?
Remember that was? I remember that was. What about you? You remember that was? So this video is coming together nicely. It's Thursday, September 5th. I'm editing here. Got a bunch more stuff that's about this. The election possibly ending up in a tie. I mean, I'll put that in the title of the video. And then Trump, WWE stuff, and the rest of it, right? And so what you see here, and there's more to come, is that Kamala really doesn't have a way, right? So when someone becomes like a stand-up comic, they just have to get up on stage at open mic nights and places like that and develop a style, develop a cadence, develop a timing and, delivery, and just get comfortable up on stage in front of people, right? And Kamala, like when she ran for president in 2016, she just didn't have that. She wasn't ready. She really hadn't been in a real debate before. And, all those people that were up there, they weren't great, but they all have their style. They've been doing this for a number of years, right? I've done this. If you look at my earlier videos, and, I just wasn't as fluid as I am now. Like, it just, when you do something for a while, you just get better at it. You find your rhythm. You find your voice, right? She doesn't have a voice. She doesn't have ethics. She doesn't have a persona. She doesn't have any kind of real moral compass. And I don't even know if, like, just with Trump didn't really want to be president until, like, he was. And then he didn't want to let it go. But he had a voice in terms of being a public figure. Like, he had a persona, and he was, he's about something. He's about himself and his brand, and, Trump. Kamala Harris, like, I don't even know why she's doing this. Like, I don't know what her motivation is. I mean, there's the typical motivation. It's, why wouldn't you? Like, who doesn't want to be president? That kind of way of thinking, being successful, climbing the ladder, being at the top of something. But why does she really want to be president, right? Like, I don't think Donald Trump knew why he wanted to be president when he ran. I thought he was just doing it as a publicity stunt. You remember the third debate, he just sort of packed it in. He gave up, and he looked like he was just relegated to the polls. Said Hillary was going to win, and he thought he probably, did a great job of building his brand. But lo and behold, I think he was surprised himself when he won, right? But I don't think he ever really figured out why he wanted to be president. Now we know, it's about revenge and these other things, right? Like, he has motivation to become president. But I don't know what her motivation is. She isn't really a seasoned politician. She's not a professional. So she's all over the place trying to, build a persona, and they're giving her all this feedback and telling her, talk this way, do this way. She's trying to figure it out right in front of everybody. And that's why it's so awkward, because she really, doesn't know what she's doing out there. Like, she has no concept of how to do this because she's never done it before. So she does the not going back thing here, and then segues into another. It's just weird set of. She has different like inflection points, different cadence, and that is this weird kind of southern accent she's trying to do. I mean, she's just like, she doesn't have a way, She's just floundering out here.
We are not going back.
Not going back.
And
instead of going back,
we fight for a future.
Where
Where no person has to go broke just because they get sick. And so building on the work
it's just, like in its Obama thing here, right?
of President Joe Biden and I, and the work we have done in the White House, we will continue to strengthen the Affordable Care Act and make...
Boom. Obamacare. So this is classic Kamala Harris, right? She's going to do the unburdened by what has been thing at the end of this. And so, but she goes into this weird different sets of cadences.
Every American has an opportunity to buy a home or start a business or build intergenerational wealth and have a future that matches their dreams and ambitions and aspirations.
If you have an immigration problem and you have cheap labor, that ain't going to happen, right? Like, they know it. Like, if you bring in, illegal immigrants are like the ultimate scabs because they work without really, they're under the table. And so, they're union busters.
Because, of course, that's the nature of who we are as Americans. We have dreams. We can see what is possible unburdened by what has been.
Boom, there it is. There it was right there.
We have aspirations. We have ambitions. And the system that is a good system is one that supports that and allows people the opportunity to go where they can see and imagine themselves to be. That's
or not to be. That is the question.
What I'm talking about when I talk about.
Yeah, what are you talking about? What the fuck are you talking about? Like, this, she has her own word salad issues.
Opportunity economy. We fight for a future where
we fight for a future.
Every senior can retire with dignity.
Well, they can retire with dignity. All right, I gotta find those other two parts. I think it's at the beginning. Then she has a beautiful gaffe of her own here.
Of America's steelworkers.
They're promising that American steel is going to remain American steel. I believe the Chinese are trying to buy it. I don't know, somebody. It's going to remain American owned.
All of America's workers. So, friends, 64 days until the most election of our lives.
Until the 64 days until the most election of our lives. That was a classic Kamala.
And probably one of the most important in the life of our nation. Truly.
Truly.
And we know this is going to be a tight race to the very end.
Yeah, we do. This is where she gets more southern.
It's going to be a tight race.
It's going to be.
To the very end. So let's not pay too much attention to those polls. Because as unions and labor knows best, we know what it's like to be the underdog. And we are the underdog in this race. And we have some hard work then ahead of us. But here's the beauty of us in this room. We like hard work.
Yeah, what do we do? Because we're laborers.
Hard work is good work.
Hard work is good work.
Is joyful work.
Yeah, that's not true. No one likes that kind of work, right? I mean, you're just those horrible jobs and the toxic waste you absorb, coal mining and steel working and all that stuff. I mean, no one loves the work, right? Mundane aspect of it, doing the same thing over and over again. I mean, manufacturing, doing the same, hitting the same button, 1,000 times a day, right? Doing the same action, non-thinking type of thing. Nobody loves that, right? They might love the pay, they might love the security of a job, whatever. but it isn't the work itself. Like, you know, that's why you have days off. That's why you guys, Labor Days, there's a holiday, right? So you don't have to fucking work. Like, you know, let's come in on our days off, like, only because they'll pay you twice as much, right? You know, our holiday pay, or, you know, time and a half or double time. Nobody loves the work, right? They don't love the work. So this was this is in Detroit. That's why I was going through this thing, couldn't find it. Harris called out for her cringe accent in Detroit.
Better thank a union member for the 5-day work week. You better thank a union member for sick leave. You better thank a union member for paid leave. You better thank a union member for vacation time.
And so then somebody sent me this meme about it here.
You better thank a union member for sick leave.
Why are you talking like that?
You better thank a union member for paid leave.
You know, back before the war broke out, I was a saucier in San Antone.
Let's just get through the next 64 days. How about that?
I bet I could call up some of them greens. Yeah, noodle some crawfish out the patty, yo.
You better thank a union member for sick leave.
Why you?
And so, you know, it's just so odd what she does. So, then this happened.
Peter Doocy asking the questions right now.
About Hamas leaders and what they have done. He was very clear on October 7th. He has been very clear multiple times thereafter on what Hamas has done. And
what is this hummus you speak of?
they have, I mean, it is a heinous murder.
It's heinous.
Of what they did recently.
Recently, the stuff they've been doing recently and the stuff they've been doing in the past. You know, let's not talk about those 20,000 dead Palestinian kids, because they're not as important.
And what they did on October 7th, and what they, you know, more than 1,200 souls were taken.
1,200 souls were taken. Well, it's not souls. The souls just go. Like, it's like you're when people say that, like, there's so many souls on board, that's just stupid, right? Like, the soul's going to go where it's going to go after you die. If there's a soul, then it has another existence, right, where it doesn't need your body. Your body needs the soul, but the soul doesn't need the body, right, for life. The soul has its own life, the life of the soul, right? It's just stupid shit, right?
Then hostages were taken. That's why we're trying to get this deal done, to get people home to their families, including American hostages. And
like, she's just so hard to listen to. Like, she does this thing where she's so annoying. You know, you have people in your life that when you try to talk to them about something, they act in such a way like it's a deterrent for you to tell them the truth, right? You, like, as truthers, you have that. When you tell people the truth, they'll act in such a way that it'll, you know, you're like, well, this isn't worth for me to do it anymore. Or if you have to confront somebody on some bullshit thing they're doing, you know, and they act in such a way where they make it, you know, hard for you to talk to them. They shut down the truth. They shut down conversations, and that's what this girl's good at, right? She's so, like, bad in terms of her, like, you know, unreal, just not reality based. And it's kind of the job of the press secretary. She does it really well. You know, when things are so obvious, and to just lie in the face of obvious stuff like Joe Biden being senile, right? Like, everyone knows it, and she still goes out and blathers on and just tries to shut down any kind of notion that this guy is old and senile, right?
we're continuing to be very, very clear about that. He was asked a question. He answered it directly. But Hamas is responsible. They have more American blood on their hands. The president was clear about that in his statement. And he has been over almost a year now, has been very clear about that, and will continue to be so.
A different topic. Since when does the vice president have what sounds like a southern accent?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, they're memes, right? Like, there's memes now.
Well,
I mean, this is...
She was talking about unions in Detroit using one tone of voice.
Is this something that
same
you think...
line.
Okay, Peter.
That she used the same line in Pittsburgh, and it sounded like she at least had some kind of a southern drawl.
I mean, do you hear the question that you're... I mean, do you think Americans seriously think that this is an important question? They can't...
Oh, yeah, they do, because they're memes, right? Like, this is stuff people are pointing out because she's a poser and she's fake, right? She's performative, and that's, she's getting caught doing that, and of course they all are. This is politics. But she's kind of appropriating an accent. She comes from Berkeley, California, pretentious California area, and she's rocking this weird, it's not even really a Southern, I don't know what it is, right? But it's not really something that she's a part of culturally or any of these other things. It's this Obama way of talking, right?
You know what they care about? They care about the economy. They care about lowering costs. They care about health care. That's what Americans care about.
So
that's what they want to hear.
This is something...
They care about, your colleague just asked me about what basically we talked about, went back and forth about democracy and freedom.
Yeah, that's it too. That's what they care about. I know what American people care about.
That's what they care about. I'm not even going to entertain some question about the president. It's just hearing it sounds so ridiculous.
Well, but hearing it is...
The question, I'm talking about the questions, is just insane.
See, she's really good at gaslighting, because how do you know the question's insane when you didn't hear her say what she said? Because she said this first, right?
It sounds like a Southern accent.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So how do you go from, I have no idea what you're talking about, to your question's insane? Because people do care about it, because on the internet, I'm seeing it all over the place, right? And they decide to show this clip on Fox News. At least people on the right care about it. And maybe some people in the middle on the left, right, are like, she acts, it's just odd what she does with her various, she just doesn't have a voice, like I said earlier. And she knew they were going to ask this. When there are memes and something's going viral, they're like, all right, you're going to get asked about her Southern accent, probably by Ducey, right? Like, she knows, like, this isn't, that question's insane. It's insane in the membrane. Like, I don't even know. Where's this coming from? Like, it's just so bad, the gaslighting, and it's painful, right? It's painful that, they'll just lie about everything when they're just flat out caught, right? Okay, so I want to destroy this thing. It's a 30-second ad about Kamala Harris being fearless. Let's start off here. This says, I think from the convention. It was recommended to me. I haven't watched it yet, but I think this is straight out of her convention. They're trying to build a bio for her, a personality, right? Profile.
The one thing Kamala Harris has always been: fearless.
She's always been fearless. Even when she was born, she was a daredevil.
As a prosecutor, she put murderers and abusers behind bars.
Because she's fearless. Only a fearless woman could do that.
California's Attorney General, she went after the big banks and won $20 billion for homeowners. And as vice president,
that's only a person without fear, a daredevil, could do that.
She took on the big drug companies to cap the cost of insulin for seniors. Because
she stood up to all these Goliaths and won. And they're pretty cool about it, and they're all supporting her. Maybe not the big banks like Trump. But certainly, Big Pharma is supporting her, right?
Kamala Harris has always known who she represents.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Yeah, she's fearless. So this was part of her bio, and this is one of the words they're using for her, which is fearless. And let me destroy this thing. I'm going to switch over to a voiceover. So one of the things I do here is I, take on things that people just accept as being good, right? The majority of people think that being fearless is good because they've been told that fear is a bad thing, that fear is something that is, so you want to get rid of it. You should be a person that doesn't have any fear of anything, right? There are words like pride and fear, like fearless and pride and some of these other things, that are like having a killer instinct. That's another. Being a killer now, like, it's a good thing in our society. And I have learned through my spiritual practice, for example, like when I played basketball, I was an athlete years ago. If somebody called you soft, you were like supposed to fight them, right? To prove you weren't soft. But years later, when my late 20s, when I was 29, and in my early 30s, when I started to become a practitioner of a spiritual practice, the idea of having a soft heart and being soft was a good thing, right? Being sensitive to other people's and the environment and whatever. Like, you open up your heart, you're going to have to be sensitive, right? You have to be aware of other people's points of view, and you have to. I mean, that's one of the reasons I can do what I do here, because when you open up to God, you open up to everybody. Like, when you're opening your heart up to God, you're opening your heart up to everything, right? And you have to, broaden your horizon and expand your consciousness and see other people's point of view and be sensitive to other people's feelings, right? You start feeling the things that other people feel. Like, I would say, I can be harsh and hurt people's feelings. Like, I say mean things. And, think about how it is now for me. Like, so how bad it was before. Like, I'm better now, right? So, and I would feel other people's hearts, like, after I would say something. I could feel how I hurt their heart, or how their heart felt, and I would feel bad because I could, I was feeling what they were feeling, and I caused that, or at least I was partially, sometimes it would be truth that I'd be saying, so, sometimes it was their own inability to see themselves, but still the feeling was there, right? And so this idea of being a killer and being someone with a killer instinct is, so celebrated in our American culture, but it's a sociopathic type of thing where you're killing indiscriminately and often wrongly, right? Like a, Dirty Harry type of, hero figure, right? So we have that. And some of it came from the training I got from the third master of the Sizemore system, who could just go to some place and dissect things that were culturally acceptable in that country that nobody ever thought about, that were kind of fucked up, right? And fearless is one of them. And so the idea that fear is a bad thing, why would we have it? When fear is necessary for your survival. In animals, right, they have a flight or fight type situation. Fight, which would be aggression and come from a place of anger, and fear, which would come from, a sense of fear of something that's going to kill you, right? Like, at every moment you're out there in the wild, there's things that are trying to kill you. Other creatures of your own species for dominance. You're being hunted, whatever it is, territorial type situation. If you're a predator, you're trying to be supplanted. If you're a lion, by other lions, right? And then there's the, animals that are being hunted, which is the majority of them. If you're not the apex predator, then you're, constantly have to watch out for other predators or watch out for members of your own species, right? And there's situations where you're in a conflict with another animal where it is fight or flight. Or it could be something like a weather event or something, right? A fire, or whatever it might be. Well, you see it all the time. Like, I go out with my dogs and we see a rabbit and the rabbit runs. Occasionally we might see a deer and the deer runs, right? And they're running it for their lives multiple times a day. And they need a burst of energy and motivation to do that. And if they had no fear, they'd be dead. Like, there are animals across the, animal kingdom, if without any fear at all, they'd be dead, right? They'd be, eaten by something else because they wouldn't have the proper motivation and a catalyst to make them move away from something that's dangerous, and they face danger all the time. So fear exists, right, as a natural life-saving element of their life, right? And also having this idea of, a natural, healthy fear of death, right? Where you're aware of things that are precarious, things that are possibly dangerous, right? Like, you're in a situation where you're up high and you have to cross over something, or you have to, navigate something, the side of a mountain, a cliff or something. And there's a possibility that if you fall, you die. The possibility of falling is there. And so, being panicked and being freaked out and having a panic attack isn't good. Being overcome with fear isn't good. But having a healthy amount of fear that you're in a life-threatening situation, that you're not going to do something that'll cause your own death. Driving a car, things like that, right? That you're, aware that every time you get in the car, there's a possibility that you could die because of, another car hitting you, you doing something wrong, and that you're, alert enough and aware enough and taking it seriously enough, aware of the danger, right? So those are all things where fear is a positive, life-saving aspect of your life, right? And so as the president, you know, in terms of the official story, you have a black box that follows you around, right? This is what most people believe. I don't really believe this because these presidents are handled. But you have a black box where you can launch nuclear weapons at any moment, right? And so you should have a healthy fear of that. If you're president and you presided over the welfare of so many people, you should have a fear of killing soldiers, your own soldiers, and other people. You should have a fear of killing civilians and droning them, right? Like Joe Biden droning kids. Like, you should have a fear of that, the responsibility, right? That there'd be some kind of fear of that kind of, situation where you could destroy the world, right? I mean, in reality, you get into the presidency, you should make a decision that a launch of nuclear weapons is just for bluffing. That you would never do it under any circumstance. Like, that's how the mentality. You would tell the enemy you would do that, but you should do that, and just as a mental, if you thought it through. Because as soon as you launch nuclear weapons, and whatever, dick measuring kind of, mano-a-mano crap that you had going on with Russia or China or whatever it was, right? You're killing so many innocent people, but also this radioactive poison is now unleashed, and the winds are going to blow it wherever it is. It's going to kill animals and people and destroy habitat and, undermine the whole health of the planet. If there's a multiple nuclear war, that can destroy the world, right? Where nobody will be able to inhabit it. And just because there's a few pricks on the other side in Russia or, Putin or whatever it is that, China, just taking them down at the expense of everybody else, every creature on this planet, should never be an option, right? Because there should be a fear of that, like a natural, fear of destroying the planet. Like, you have the ability to do it, and your decision would do that. And it was just, so this is, being fearless is a bad thing. This idea of being fearless, because you need to have a healthy fear of the stress as a leader and a potential causer of global destruction and so many other things. Like, there's a natural level of fear that you have, like it saves your life to a certain extent if you have a natural fear of death. But also, like, for me, I had I was just wrecked after COVID, right? And I just wasn't, like, I didn't have COVID anymore, but the damage to my body, and I was already in a bad place. Like, my body was trending, downward. I didn't have cancer, I didn't get anything like that, but I was, on the verge of being diabetic, and, I'd gained weight, and I couldn't do physical work, and, all these things. And, I thought about my wife and, what it would mean if I died, and all the stress around that and these things, and being saddled with somebody with poor health, just having, a fear of, like, how your situation would affect other people, and, just all of it. Like, there's people here that depend on my, whatever I do here. At least they're, influenced, and I have a responsibility to my, to the spiritual movement and the, divinity, God within me, and the, my soul and things, to complete my tasks, right? Complete what I'm doing here in my life. I have some things I'm doing, building a farm, and, contributing to getting this idea out about divinity within you and things, and that I cover here, and that I have a purpose, and like to fulfill that purpose, I had to become more healthy, right? So I, having a fear of that, like, it wasn't like I was necessarily petrified of dying, but just even the poor health things, and I had to, you have to fight back, right? Things that, fear can be a great motivating, just as anger can be a great motivator. Like, it can make you move, it can make you get going, it can get you to fight back and things like this, right? Fight or flight. So there, there's positive things for fear. There's things where they can be utilized for your benefit and the benefit of others. Now, certainly being petrified and not, doing what you're supposed to do is not a good thing, where you have, we have unnatural fear, where you have phobias, where you become fearful of things, so you don't live, right? You know, you lock yourself away and you don't live. You don't take chances. You don't do what you need to do. You know, like people who are, you know, petrified of having COVID, and they have 6 masks on, and they're wearing masks in a car, and they, you know, cease to, you know, exist because of their, you know, being petrified. So that's where fear becomes some kind of, you know, people who are indulgent of fear, right? Who become fear-based, and like even they see risks that aren't even there, and they, you know, there's a sense of, you know, making bad decisions based in fear. So like that's where fear becomes something where it dominates a person's existence, right? Where they don't do what they're supposed to do, they don't fulfill their tasks, they don't follow their soul's path, right? They don't do what they're supposed to do because of fear. But having some fear is, you know, healthy, and having some, you know, self-preservation, the preservation of others, and you know, the natural, like where fear would be healthy, where fear would be normal, right? And so when you talk about somebody who's fearless, you know, the way that sociopaths, the old sociopath diagnosis, which is now called anti-personality diagnosis, a true sociopath is somebody who doesn't have the proper emotional response to things. They're dead inside, right? And so they don't have the natural human feelings. They're completely insensitive. And to feel alive, they have to take risks, and they have to do things that are socially unacceptable, like big things, sociopathic things, right? They don't just to get a feeling of anything. They don't have the natural feelings, that their emotional response isn't there. And so they don't have the fear that people have. They don't have the, you know, the anger, these other things, and they have to do drastic things. Sometimes it's be torturing other people. Sometimes it's wrecking a global situation, starting wars, you know, doing big kind of things just to get any kind of like feeling like they're alive, to have an emotional response. And so being fearless is, you know, that's not a good thing. Like that's a sociopath, right? Somebody who doesn't have the natural feelings inside of them, right? So you would want somebody, because fear is natural, and fear is, you know, again, the good healthy fear, like not a something that cripples you, you know, something that prevents you from living a natural life where fear dominates you, but having, you know, some level of fear, whatever that means, right? Even mental fear, not what the feeling, like the ideas that people have. For example, both Trump and Kamala Harris have to have a fear of losing. Like every athlete, every person who's competitive has to have a fear of losing, has to have a fear of, you know, being embarrassed, being humiliated, being unsuccessful, being a failure. Every person who's successful has a strong feeling of failure, because it'll push them to do things, sometimes inappropriate things, sometimes immoral things, sometimes, you know, things that are unethical, sometimes things that, you know, completely cross the line. They would rather do those things than lose, right? They would rather train, you know, obsessively, like they would just the fear of losing. Like Michael Jordan was petrified of losing, right? He had a phobia of losing. Those people who have that competitive, hyper competitive people, you know, in terms of people who want to save face. And Kamala Harris and Trump both have that. You can see it, right? I mean, if she's fearless, then why didn't she do an interview? You know, why didn't she do multiple interviews? You know, all the things that they do to manufacture her audience, all the way that she's controlled, all the elements of control they use to assure their win, right? I mean, they're both terrified of losing this. I mean, it's devastating to lose this. I mean, Trump, his life is over. You know, he'll go down as a loser. He's not getting a third shot at being president. Everyone will move on. If he loses this thing, you know, he'll be crushed. You know, I mean, whatever he does after that, and God knows they'll try to maybe keep him in the spotlight and keep these criminal investigations going or whatever it is, right? But the shame of losing a Kamala Harris, and after losing a Joe Biden, and just all of it, right? The loss of control. I mean, these people are control freaks, and the other, you know, as well. They like power and control. They seek power so they can control things, right? They're fearful of not having control of, you know, whatever situations that are in their life. They dominate the people around them. This is the reason they seek power like that, right? Kamala Harris her career will be over, losing to Trump, because of the way this election is being billed. And so there is fear. Like, there's so much fear there. Like, so much fear of their personal, their egotistical, their desires, and, the fear of losing, and all these things that are part of that. But the other piece to this is, whenever there is a negative suggestion, the way that your subconscious mind handles things, it doesn't process the word no. So when you're giving yourself a goal or anything, I've talked about this substantially in other older videos, but when you have goals and you have suggestions and mantras or whatever it is, you don't want to have them be negative. You don't want to say something like, I want to stop smoking, because the word also, subconsciously, you're thinking about smoking. Don't smoke, you can't smoke, you can't, you're preventing yourself from having something, right? Which immediately causes fear and, loss of control. And so if you're thinking about, I can't smoke, I don't smoke, I won't smoke, right? Oh man, I really want a cigarette, right? Like, I shouldn't eat, I'm fat, I gotta, all these things, negative things. I can't eat, when you have a diet. When you don't want to have this idea of withholding, or there's something that you want that you're preventing yourself from having, right? Instead, you have this idea that I want to be natural and healthy. I want to eat naturally and healthy. I want to eat just as much as I need. I want to overeat, these things, right? Like that, it's something that you're working toward, something that's desirable. Something that's going to make you feel good, right? That you want to be healthy. You don't want to smoke cigarettes. You don't want to take in things that are killing you. You want to, word it positively. Word it on what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. And so anytime you have a word like fearless, fear is in what you're saying you are. Oh, I want to be fearless. Well, then you're meditating and you're focusing on the word fear. You're being obsessed with the word fear, right? You say, I'm brave, or I want to be brave. I want to be courageous, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean you're without fear. It means that you have managed your fear in a healthy way, that you're using your fear as a healthy, natural part of your decision-making process, where fear is a part of it, right? There's people who, like I said, that they don't have the proper amount of fear, and they take unnecessary risks and chances. Not just sociopaths, but thrill seekers, because they don't have healthy fears, but they do things that are dangerous because they want that exhilaration, right? They're fear junkies, in a sense, adrenaline junkies. And so that's not desirable either. It's something where you're making bad decisions. There's also people who believe, this is a big thing in America, that if you're scared of something, you should force yourself to do it and overcome your fears. And if it's an unnatural fear, then that's appropriate, right? But like, let's say you have a fear of heights and you jump out of an airplane. That's not appropriate. You can just get rid of your fear of heights in a natural way. There's cleaning you can do, and that's the meditation practice that I do that removes, these kind of obstacles. But you don't necessarily have to go do something that causes the fear and overcome it that way, like you're forcing your way through it. And so all this stuff is just like bullshit stuff, right? This idea of, first, she is a person with fear, and that's actually a good thing. She isn't fearless, but what they're trying to say is that there's these big powerful organizations, and she's completely fearless for taking them on. And we know that isn't true, because she folded to the Catholic Church, where these people, she's a big person who stands up for abuse victims, and her whole reason for being a lawyer was she had a friend who was being sexually abused by her dad or stepdad or something, remember, from her convention. And that made her want to be a lawyer and wanted to stand up to the bullies and things. That she stands up to bullies, and then, she did that when she took on Kavanaugh. She's going to do that when she takes on Trump in this debate and all these things, right? But we know that isn't the case, because she's completely owned by all these special interests, and she's this idea that she stood up to big pharma and these things. If she did, she wouldn't be on stage, because these companies are, the people who are kingmakers, right? Big pharma is like one of the richest, most influential lobbies in America, and they're not allowing you big banks and these things. So it's just silly. Like, she wouldn't be up on stage, and she wouldn't be handpicked if she wasn't going to play ball, right? If she wasn't going to go along with them. These are just artificial unsubstantial things that make her look like she stood up to them, and in reality they're just, she's just playing her role, and they're slap on the wrist to these corporate giants and things, but they make her look like a giant killer. It's just bullshit. She has plenty of fear, and the whole idea of being fearless is bogus. Anyways, let's move on to the next thing here. So there's been a Raygunn update.
Australian breakdancer Raygunn, widely known as Raygunn, went viral after a performance at the Paris Olympics. Now she's apologizing to the breaking community for the backlash it provoked.
It is really sad to hear those criticisms, and I am very sorry for the backlash that the community has experienced.
In an exclusive interview with Australian current affairs show The Project, Gunn defended her performance.
I knew that people were not going to understand my style and what I was going to do. I wanted to bring out some Australian moves and themes.
This is not the first time that Gunn has responded to the controversy. Weeks ago, in an Instagram post, she said the backlash she received.
So I don't think that she should have apologized. And, when you suck, right? You need to apologize for sucking. I mean, there was a failure. If she manipulated the situation to where she got a spot that somebody who didn't suck deserved, well, that's something different, right? But if she was the best that Australia had to offer in terms of breakdancing, then there's that. It seems like there must have been some manipulation because there had to be somebody better, right? But I want to talk about art, what's accepted as art. So this is Picasso, right? With these twisted, imagine having something like this in your house and looking at it this guy was severely abused as a kid, and he was completely messed up, right, by his abuse. And so he saw the world through, he has artistic talent in terms of his ability to draw, but what he draws is this. Kids that I work with in treatment centers, kids who had suffered sexual abuse and things, and they were in treatment centers because of acting on this perversion that happened to them, often were great artists. But the stuff they would draw, there's this one kid, he drew a picture of, drawing a hand is a hard thing. This is like a 10-year-old kid, and he drew a picture of a kid, sort of a scared looking kid, that was in the light, and then out of a closet in a dark room, there was a hand, like a claw, like a Count Dracula's hand, with pointed nails and stuff, luring, persuading the kids with one finger, calling the kid into the darkness, right? And it was very profoundly, a part of this kid's story, right, and all these kids' stories. But it was hard to look at, right? It was, unpleasant. And this stuff was unpleasant to look at, right? These deformed people that he plays, that he painted. And, he had an ex-wife that the more and more that he painted her in a distorted fashion, the more and more it reflected on her what she felt about herself, and she committed suicide, Picasso. So this, this passes as art, and it clearly isn't, right? It's, it takes artistic talent to draw this, but it's an abomination. It's celebrated. Some of these things are priceless paintings, or, extraordinarily, overpriced paintings. And this is just one example of that. Another thing would be the Met Gala, right? Where you have these, bizarre outfits and twisted outfits. We see this all the time. People send me stuff on just the weird stuff that's in the art world. And what people get away with, indulging in these, perverted kind of just, it's decadent as well. The amount of money that's spent on these outfits and things that are in the art community that are, so oftentimes demonic in nature, but just, gaudy. This guy holding his own head here, all the stuff that's out there. And this is permissible, right? This sucky, this person has a Picasso outfit, right? Blending the, like a Picasso type of painting, this person had an extra head, all these things. And this passes as art. So if you're going to say breakdancing is an art form, which dance is an art form, right? And there's all this, you see some of the dances out there, and some of it that, these girls who mutilate their feet and their ankles doing ballet, and all the stuff that you see, these decadent dances and perverted things that are out there, right? that there's, a spectrum of dancing that even includes stripping and strippers, right? Pole dancers and whatever. Like, some of these things are competitive and also considered art forms. Like people say about art, that, even if you suck at it, like, there's a spectrum, and you might not have the talent to, be a good artist, or, in any form to be a good dancer or singer, but you should do it. Like, people say that you should do it even if you suck, right? Just, participating in this something that it's a form of expression. Art is a form of a human expression. The fact is that this breakdancing stuff that they do, there's locking and popping, and there's some of these other forms of breakdancing that are much more interesting, and have, these things where two breakdancers spin on their heads, and they had to do all these kind of, these, weird moves. Like, I saw the bronze medal men's breakdancing competition, and I'm like, why is this in the Olympics? It sucks, and it's not really a sport, and, anything that has judging and, including gymnastics and figure skating, which are big Olympic sports, there's always going to be controversy. There's always going to be, like Tanya Harding, for example, because she was like, redneck trailer trash. They didn't give her the proper scores. She was the first woman to do certain, if you ever watched that movie Tanya, which is kind of a funny movie, but she was one of the first women to do these certain jumps, of triple lutz or whatever, all these stupid things, right? And she was the first one to land these things in competition, and yet she wasn't given the credit because of, who she was and her, the way that she presented herself, right, as being this sort of bulldog, tough girl from a trailer, like trailer trash, white trash kind of thing, right? And they didn't like her, the judges, and it reflected in their, scoring of her and things like that. If somebody sucks and you make fun of them, in a light way, or maybe not so much, and, I applaud the making fun of Raygunn, but she doesn't need to apologize, right? Like, again, if she manipulated the Australian breakdancing community to be chosen, that's something, right? That's, cheating, and you're depriving somebody who's more deserving. And you certainly owe that person an apology, and I guess your country as well, and certainly the breakdancing community. But other than that, like, other than her being, rigging the system being rigged to pick her when there's better, people to do it. If she won legitimately, and that was what she came up with. She's 37 years old and she's limited. She wasn't going to win the gold. She sucked, and sucking you shouldn't apologize for, right? If you go out and you do your best, she was kind of clueless. I mean, all those things, right? You can make fun of her, like I said, but like, she doesn't owe anybody a freaking apology. Apologies are overrated, right? I kind of don't believe in them. Like, apologies only matter if the person changes their behavior. If you do something wrong or bad and you feel bad about it, and you go inside and you figure out a way to adjust yourself so you don't do that again, or don't do that kind of behavior, and there's some self-awareness of your mistake, that's really what should happen. It's about changing who you are. Apology is usually a way for a person to, who's done something wrong, to minimize the reaction of what they did to, the other people, or in this case, the breakdancing community. Like, apologies in general. When you're like a person who's a parent, or you're, working in for me, it was treatment centers as well. When you're working with kids, there's this idea of forced apologies, right? I work with sex offenders, and they had this thing called the second part of the sex offender program, the Pathways Sex Offender. It was a 5-part, like, it had 5 different modules to its, components. The first one is understanding your assault cycle and the pattern of abuse that you went through and you go through in terms of that, to perpetrate these abusive acts. And the second thing was called victim reunification, where, especially if it was like a family member, oftentimes it was a sibling. Oftentimes an older sibling would sexually abuse someone in the family, so they had to reunify, and they had to go through this process of, like, healing. And part of this was the abuser had to write a letter saying it was completely 100% their fault, taking full responsibility, that the victim didn't play any role in it. And there was, like, an apology and all this stuff that had to happen. And, it's kind of a good thing, but only if it's, if the person's doing it because they feel bad. and not because they're doing it so they can get out of that treatment center, which they had to do, right? So, they'd often write these letters and they wouldn't be able to present it to the victim because the victim's family or whatever wasn't a part of it. But oftentimes there was a meeting between the two people, and the perpetrator went to apologize to the victim, and if they didn't do that, they couldn't go back into their house, right? They couldn't go back and live at home, and oftentimes a sibling that was abused wanted that to happen. The parents wanted that to happen, but the kid would go back home and abuse the kid again, and so it didn't mean anything, right? Because it didn't come from a place of them feeling bad. It only came because they were forced to do it. And so when you have kids and you force them to apologize, does it really matter if they're only doing it because you forced them to do it, right? And so all these politicians and celebrities that have a lapse in judgment, and everyone's judging them, and they come out and apologize. It's just a way for them to minimize the reaction against them. Are they really sorry, right? Because it's only about changing. But anyways, with all the crappy art that's out there, all the stuff that I showed you, all the twisted art, her sucking at breakdancing isn't offending anybody. It's her having limitations and thinking posing like a kangaroo was going to work, and it didn't. And so it's just she doesn't owe the breaking community an apology, because if it was real art, if breakdancing was real art, then whatever she did, anybody doing it, you have to start somewhere. And if you're just into doing it and you suck at it, there's things that people like to do and they suck at it, and they should be allowed to suck at something. Certainly not on the Olympic level, but if that's the best that Australian women could produce, and maybe she has better moves, and she tried to do these things about Australia, like the kangaroo pose, and it was a fail, and it looks silly. But breakdancing in general is silly. A lot of the poses are silly. The whole thing where they stare each other down and they you've been served. I mean, it's not Olympic worthy. I mean, it's silly. It's not a real sport, and it's played out. I'm not impressed by these guys spinning on their heads, and it takes some athletic ability. I mean, it's not like it's it's easy, but it's not really all that entertaining. And none of this stuff was her kangaroo moves stand out as being particularly goofy, but the whole thing's kind of goofy, right? It was a big swing and a miss. Anyways, let's go on to the next thing here. Okay, so there's this, I saw this trailer, Mr. McMahon, the official trailer at Netflix. And I can't show you the whole trailer because Netflix is stupid and sucks on their copywriting policies. But this is the only thing that really pertains to what I've been covering, right? So here's Donald J. Trump. His hair was a little bit less red then. And here's Vince McMahon. I don't know, this isn't that long ago. This isn't very long before he ran for president, right? And Trump is going to slap him here, right? There he is. He's a big slapper in his pink tie. And so, this is a follow-up to Ketchup Gate and Band-Aid Gate, right? That were both, Ketchup Gate was the day of the fake shooting. Band-Aid Gate was the stuff that he did at the convention where he rolled out. And I called it as a WWE thing. And, here he is. I mean, he's a character. Trump's a character. This guy's, Hulk Hogan's talking about how Vince McMahon is more of a character than he is, they're all characters. They're all fake personas. And Trump's a part of that, right? They all are. This weird thing he's doing. Here's a different angle of that. And so, unless he's slapped him more than once, it's very possible that he slapped him a couple of times. So there's a couple of billionaires playing. He's such a depraved person, Vince McMahon, and Trump and him were very close. They were good friends. So I copied a few things off the TV last night, and one of them, or this morning, but I taped them. Who cares? But anyways, this thing didn't make it to the internet, but the John King and Aaron Burdett did, so I copied it again off of YouTube. And I want to show you, this is about the possibility of a tie. And there's a couple of things about this here. And so let's start off with this part. This is, they're getting into the nitty-gritty of the demographics and the voters that are left that are undecided. Let's watch this here first.
Right now than the Harris team does.
Ashley, that number that David pointed out about how many people
are still changeable voters, about 15% of likely voters around it in all those 6 states. If you're the
How the fuck do you not know who you're going to vote for? Like, there's 15% of people, state by state, it's around 15% of people who don't know who they're voting for yet. Like, how the fuck is that even possible, right? You know, if you don't buy into the party bullshit, like if you're undecided, you're not a cult member of the Democrats or the Republicans. So you're kind of a freelance person. You know, an individual thinker, one would think, or a person with critical thinking skills. And these candidates both suck. Like, I think anybody who votes is a dope. Anybody who dopes is a vote. You know, I think it's silly to think that anything is going to get better because of either one of these people. It's impossible to understand what that person's going to do. I mean, there is, you know, some minor policies that, you know, things that we know that Trump did before, things that Kamala will do to continue on with what Biden did. But, like, in terms of how it affects you, sure. If you can see a perceivable effect, not just some bullshit thing, but a real effect one way or another, right? But people have enough information about this whole thing. They certainly do about Trump. And at this point, you should be able to decide. Like, there's just, like, how much more information do you need to make a freaking decision? It's people who don't, you know, won't make a decision, or they want to be wooed, or whatever it is, right? But now they're getting into the nitty-gritty of these people and their psychology and trying to find out how to win over these undecided voters, because they're going to make the difference. These people who can't make a decision, who are probably the worst of all the people, even the people voting, even the cult members, these people who can't even make a decision are going to decide the fate of the country in terms of the president, even though it's, you know, not really, but in terms of what people think.
Harris campaign, how do you reach those voters?
Well, I mean, they're doing it in very traditional and non-traditional ways. I mean, the non-traditional ways I find to be the most impressive. At the convention, they had 250 influencers that reached more than 350 million eyeballs pushing out their message. And they're going to utilize that army online to not just push back on disinformation, but to proactively push out her messaging and meeting voters where they are. So that's one way that I think they're doing it in a way that we've never seen a national campaign.
So the first guy to use the internet effectively nationally was Howard Dean. But then came the truth community and people, you know, alternative media. And the Democrats, for whatever reason, ended up on the wrong side of that shit, because the Republicans easily could have. The Republicans have always been about censorship. They've always been about control. But I don't know whether they just, because of the, you know, all these liberal CEOs and people who ran corporations or whatever it might be. But the internet kicked Hillary Clinton's ass so much so that they invented this fake news term, and they started to really censor. Like, before, they were just ignoring us in terms of people expressing themselves on the internet. But then they came out with this fake news and disinformation, even though we know the government puts out disinformation campaigns. And so do politicians, right? So, like, the whole thing is fucked and ass backwards. But the Democrats were getting their asses handed to them by the internet. And so now it's come full circle, where they've found ways to suppress and to censor people on the internet, and where they're using 250 influencers that are probably propped up by these media platforms to reach 350 million people. I mean, that's crazy, that many people. At least in terms of views, probably not people, but views. She doesn't know. She probably doesn't understand that. But either way, they're using influencers to get Kamala's message across, and then to put out what they call anti-disinformation stuff. And the Democrats have come full circle from where Hillary Clinton didn't know anything about the internet, and her campaign got completely blindsided by how the internet was being utilized against her. And now they've turned that around by manipulating the system, right? Which is completely fucked, and it makes you, you know, want to root for the Democrats less, or root against them even more because of that bullshit, right? Because that's just wrong. That they would, you know, they always steal our stuff. CNN was stealing truther, like, titles and truther, you know, they're always stealing stuff, right? Like, they're, you know, they're not original thinkers, and they've stolen so much from us, even after calling us names and trying to marginalize us. But they watch us, right? You know, they hate us because they ain't us.
is very interesting in this polling, and that is she's winning on this question about who cares about me, who cares about you. And you can see that theme now starting to run throughout her campaign. Even in her most recent ad, she opens up with, I am focused on you, and Donald Trump is not. I mean, January 6th was about Donald Trump. His efforts to cheat the election were about Donald Trump. Even his failures on COVID were about Donald Trump. So
Kamala does not care about anybody else. Trump is a narcissist, and he's thrown his most loyal people have been loyal to him, workers, friends, whatever it is, under the bus. Trump's a prick. But Kamala Harris is at least as selfish as Trump is. She doesn't care about other people. Like, come on. Like, it's just, you buy that shit? Like, I don't know how people buy that. It's just, the whole thing is just, you know, humanity. This is why there needs to be apocalypse, because of how low humanity is functioning. We have just low functioning people. And that's the adults. Like, the kids are way worse. Like, the kids are completely fucked, and, you know, it's bad. They're horrible people, and they're just, you know, we've failed them, right? The older generations have certainly failed the youth, because those guys are, like, not only are they screwed in terms of their futures, but who they are as people. They're like the worst, weakest, entitled, low functioning. I mean, the internet and everything has done a number on them. But let's get to this other piece about this thing possibly becoming a tie. Okay, so here's the piece about the possibility of a tie here. And so this dude here...
sides know that the economy is key in the election, right? It is the focus for voters more than anything else. So John King, now at the magic wall, as promised. So
the magic wall. It's the magic wall.
John, as you look at it right now with all the latest, you know, polling data, all that you've got, where and what are the paths right now to 270 tonight?
Aaron, strap in. Our new polling shows yes, some Harris.
Strap on. Put your strap on, Aaron.
Momentum, but the big headline is this is a very, 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 I could add a few more very close races. Let's just look at the data and what it tells us. This is where we are right now. The yellow states are our toss-up states. They include North Carolina. We did not poll in North Carolina this time. I'm going to lean it red. Democrats will get mad at me, but I'm going to lean that one red until I see data that proves otherwise, because it has gone red in every election since 2008. When Obama won it, was Republican before that. Here's our new polling. Harris ahead in Wisconsin outside the margin. Harris ahead in Michigan just outside the margin. That gets her to 250, right? Donald Trump ahead in Arizona outside the margin. That, let me make that red. That would move him up to 246. Pretty close, right? And then you mentioned these other states are too close to call. Pennsylvania, a genuine tie. Let's just say Harris is really +1 in Georgia and +1 in Nevada. This is just one poll. This is a hypothetical here. That alone, though, if she could held that, would get her to 272, and she could win the presidency without Pennsylvania. But, again, she's +1 in the polling. It's just as plausible, and we've seen other data, that Donald Trump could win Georgia and Donald Trump could win Nevada as well. That would get him to 268. So what happens then? You're looking at Pennsylvania, right? Let's assume Harris ekes it out. It's a tie right now. If Trump won it, he'd be president of the United States. If Harris won it under this scenario, and again, it's a scenario, that gets you to 269, 268, and it all comes down to Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, either a tie or it puts Harris over the top at 270. I'm not saying that's going to happen. What I'm saying is if you look at this data, here's where we start today.
Okay, so if Trump would win Nebraska in that scenario, it would be a tie, 269 to 269, which I don't know how the fuck they would ever have it be that there could be a tie. And before Nebraska broke up their delegates, it wouldn't have. I don't think the math would have worked that way. But now they have a one state. You know, they have the rest of the Nebraska delegates, and then they have one delegate there. So let's go to the Tim Walz family thing. Walz is from Nebraska that are for Donald Trump, right? So, like, this could come down to where there's a tie, and Nebraska is the key to it. Of course, Tim Walz was born there, and his family, at least some of them, are Trumpers. And let's show that here, and we'll come back to this. Okay, so part of this story, of course, we heard about Tim Walz's brother, who's now said that he's not going to do a joint event with Trump, but, you know, he's just not, well, I guess his brother and him weren't in contact for like 8 years, and maybe he was doing taxes for his brother or something, because his brother he was being vetted for vice president and called his mom, and then the mom handed the phone to him. And so I think that was another part of it where they hadn't talked, and there was sort of petty stuff between them, but they hadn't talked for like 8 years, and they called his brother up saying he needed tax information from him because of the vetting process. But then there's the Tim Walz family members. Here it is. Tim Walz family members pose in T-shirts declaring their presidential preferences, which was Trump, right? And so this is it here. This is Walz, Nebraska. Walz is for Trump. So these are people who live in Nebraska who are just not a, kind of a motley looking crew there. Who are Walz's. These are people who are related to him that live in Nebraska, and they don't want any part of him and Kamala Harris, even though he's a relative. And so there's a couple of things with this. Let's talk about the tie stuff first, but then the family stuff then afterwards.
Those polls tell us, Aaron, look, we are 8 weeks and 6 days away from
Wow.
counting votes. It's competitive.
269 to 268. That's a nightmare scenario, I think, for so many in this country, no matter which side of the.
Yeah, it's just so likely that that's going to happen. Because, like there's going to be controversy. This is not going to be a clean election. It's not going to be clean because, Trump's already starting to whine about how they let Kamala Harris in, and there's some challenges, Republican challenges to her being nominated without going through the nomination process and going through a at least the pretend primary. And so they didn't allow RFK into the primary. They were knocking him off of state ballots and things, and so he was a Democrat running against Biden, and he had to go independent because they were censoring him and they were just doing things that were anti-democratic, right? I mean, the way they treated him. And so they're the party that's saying they're here to protect democracy. And so Trump is already going to whine about that, right? And they're also going to say Trump's a convicted felon and, all these things. And we can't run as president as a convicted felon. There's all this mess here after the fact. Like when one party loses, there's lawsuits involved. There's all these challenges to it that can happen. And it's just not going to be clean because they want division. They want chaos. I mean, if there's a clear winner on the election night, I'd be surprised, given what's happened before. And so this scenario is very likely. Like if they're going to manufacture a scenario, imagine if it was tied, right? Like you never would have a legitimate president, because if somebody wins the presidency on a tie or a very close race, it doesn't bode well for that president, because when you win on a landslide, you have like the majority of Americans behind you, and that's just not going to happen here. I mean, I don't think it is. It certainly won't happen for Harris. If she wins, she's going to eke it out.
The political spectrum you may be on. But, John, when I was just mentioning right before you came on, talking about the economy, which both Harris and Trump were focused on today, it is the #1 issue. And Trump still has, at least from the polling you're looking at, he still has the edge there, right?
This is Trump's biggest advantage, which is why he wants to hold it and why you see the vice president out doing economic speeches. Her ads are also tilting now heavily toward the economy. In Arizona, Trump's up 5 overall. Voters view him as the better candidate by 15 points on the economy. In Georgia, where Harris is tied, maybe +1, Trump has a slighter advantage. So you can see the trend here. In places where Harris is competitive or ahead, Trump's numbers are lower. Nevada
Except for Nevada
is the outlier. This economy got thrown in the trash during COVID. But the key for Harris is to bring this Trump advantage down. Where she's winning in Wisconsin, she's up 6 in the state, Trump only +2 in the economy. This is her biggest challenge. If she can't catch Trump on the economy, at least make him +2 or +4, not +8, 16 or more. The economy right now is Trump's biggest advantage by far.
All right, well, now you go down deep in the polling today.
Right.
There were some warning signs for Harris and specific vulnerability with key voting groups. What are they?
So let's look first. The gender gap gets talked about a lot. Let's look at women voters. If you look at these numbers, Harris...
So, it's getting down to this.
Harris is essentially tracking Biden, a little better in some places. She would probably like to improve these numbers, but when it comes to women, look at Harris now and Biden 2020, and they're relatively good right there. She would like to improve them, obviously, because she's struggling. One reason you want to improve them is because she is struggling a bit among male voters, especially when you look out in the western states. In 2020, Trump won them by 2 points in Arizona. He's up 14. in 2020, 12 and 10. That's about the same. But if you look at Nevada, plus 18, plus 5. So this is a problem for the vice president, without a doubt. She needs to try to improve her stand.
Okay, so that's, you know, it's going to be more clear later on. I mean, polls are, you know, suspect but we know this thing's going to be close right now. And they want controversy. There's no way that this is going to be clean, right? If Kamala Harris wins, they will do something so Trump feels like he's screwed or whatever it is. There'll be some controversy for the Trumpers and Trump, and, you know, they all believe that. I mean, when you believe that the other person is going to destroy the world, and of course, neither one will, because they don't have the power to do that. The system is going to collapse on its own, and that's not because of our political system. Politics has almost nothing to do with the collapse of the system. You know, politics is a symptom of, you know, going in the wrong direction, a demonic system, just like anything else. But its collapse will be because it's, you know, it's an insolvent, bankrupt system where people have lost their moral compass, and there's, you know, it's the morality and the quality of the people that bring down a system, and the system itself, which is a reflection of the people. But either way, they don't want this to be clean, and if it's messy, Trump will act out, or they'll get him to act out, or whatever that is. I mean, they want like a sort of a revolution, and they want this thing to go on for months, and, you know, there's much more controversy than there will be, because, you know, the Republicans are going in feeling like they're going to get cheated. And so it's going to be different than waiting till after the election happens to start focusing on that. You know, we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. But a tie would make total sense to me, because they're, you know, they had all these firsts, right? It's the first time they had a candidate who was senile withdraw after winning a primary and then be replaced by a woman candidate with a diverse ethnic background and no real experience in an election. Of course, Trump coming back after losing, after being harassed legally and convicted, and, you know, but not sentenced, and in the Supreme Court, and like everything's kind of spiraling out of control. And so a tie would be like something that hasn't happened before. And then, like, if there is a tie, there's no way to decide it, right? I mean, I'm sure there's a way for them to decide it, but there's no way unless they redo the election. So, I mean, the whole thing is going to be interesting. But, you know, we'll see. Okay, so this is a video from a person named EO Nutrition. It has 960,000 views from 11 days ago. I don't know how many comments, 16,000 comments, so those are legitimate views. Famous influencers are dropping like flies. Why? You know, where did I hear that before? You know, for those of you guys who don't know, I have another channel, the Apocalypse Now channel, which I haven't been posting on, but I posted a Hollywood celebrities dropping like flies. I had a whole montage. I was going to add to it. I saw some movie where somebody said another dropping like flies thing. But I'll play the montage now here. I haven't done that in a while.
They're dropping like flies.
Listen, people are dropping like flies out there.
I am pissed off.
We're dropping like flies around here.
We're dropping like flies here.
Jeez, sir, 2 more just went down. Dropping like flies.
Too many people around here been dropping like flies already, and where's that getting us, huh? Nowhere. Fast.
Biden's being Biden's being extremist.
Crush that fly.
But anyways, it was about this. It was a way for me to sort of talk about the bloop without talking about the bloop, because you couldn't talk about the bloop. And so, and these people dying because of it. Now, I don't know if this guy listened into my channel or how he got this. I mean, dropping like flies is kind of a, this isn't like copyright infringement or something, but I did it first, right?
It's 2024 and influencers are still dropping like flies.
So I don't know how long he's been doing this thing. But again, like, I just don't care about it. I mean, at least the guy's talking about this phenomenon, and I believe there must be something to do with the bloop, but Who's to say? You know, he's got to die suddenly and things. Certainly isn't, you know, whatever. Let's move on. Okay, when you watch TV shows and movies, they'll introduce a part of the plot, a detail, right? They introduce a detail that's going to appear later in the drama or narrative. And the detail they've been introducing this past week is Nebraska, right? Specifically this part of Nebraska.
Blue dots are popping up in lawns across Omaha, starting right here at the house of Jason Brown and Ruth Hibner Brown.
We debated back and forth, and we went for it and said, well, I think the mystery is kind of cool.
They walked to their garage, grabbed blue spray paint, white signs, and started making these homemade blue dot signs. Why blue dot? Omaha, of course, is in Nebraska, a deep red state, but this electoral vote, this district, can be won by Democrats. Joe Biden did, and Barack Obama famously called it the blue dot. Kamala Harris also trying to win this one electoral vote. That's why these blue dot signs are popping up all across Omaha. It's part of their campaign to show Democrats that their vote not only counts, but their electoral college vote certainly does.
And so it's one of those things why the hell did they, because having the blue dot makes it possible for a tie. The other ways that, you know, if this electoral vote was with the other Nebraska votes, there would be no chance of a tie, to my understanding. So it's significant. And why does this one little section of one state get to separate its electoral college votes, which would be a big thing for a lawsuit, right? When Nebraska is a very red state, so it's it's not a swing state, but they've taken one city, well, you know, the capital, I guess, Omaha, and Mutual of Omaha was Wild Kingdom, right? There was a TV show I used to watch as a kid, right? Marlon Perkins' Wild Kingdom. But we have this clown who's Walsh, who was born in Nebraska, which I don't think makes much of a difference. But this is a city, right? When they have a city area, there is more Democrats in that city. It's just the rural areas that carry states for Republicans. But if you separated all the cities out, then there would be multiple electoral votes. There would be probably 25 possible electoral votes in every red state in the country. And so if you start separating out these small areas and say, all right, we can split up the electoral college, you might as well get rid of the electoral college, right? And just go on popular vote. And that would change the way they would campaign, because you wouldn't go state to state. You would find the population centers, and that's how you would have to do it, right? And the Republicans would no longer be able to win because of the population centers. Like, they have to campaign in states. It's a completely different, in terms of being cost effective. But anyways, this thing is coming around. Like, this is becoming a big thing because it's going to be a tight election. And if she wins by a vote, like that would be like one electoral college vote, that's, and a controversial one at that. I mean, it's just the kind of stuff they want, right? Like, I expect that there's going to be shenanigans. We'll see. Like, I don't, we'll have to see. Maybe they want a landslide for Trump, or, they want a decisive win for Trump. But if they don't, this is going to be a tight race. And so this is one of the narration points they're putting out there. Whether it's going to have importance on election night or not, we'll see. But if it does, if it comes down to one vote, then this is going to be a fucked up thing.
So, Pastor, I'll let you explain a little bit more about what you're seeing and hearing out there on the trail, and this phenomenon that we've been talking about for almost a decade now, where some evangelicals say, we're not voting for a saint, we're voting for a president, somebody who will carry out what we hope he'll carry out. And in some cases, he did that, appointing those 3 Supreme Court justices. Are you seeing cracks in that argument now?
Yeah, Willie, actually, we've been seeing those cracks since just after Donald Trump's election in 2016. He received nearly 81% of white evangelical support in 2016. But that went up from the summer of 2016, when in July he was down in the 30% range with evangelicals. But then he picked Mike Pence.
Mike Pence.
Mike Pence became a validator, and then he promised...
He's a validator, that Pence.
...to put evangelicals in his cabinet, which he...
Look at this dude right here. Look at this dude. I guess he's saying a prayer here. Look, they're praying with him.
...then did. And evangelicals rallied around Donald Trump. And almost immediately after that election, many of them regretted that decision and started to rethink their commitment to Donald Trump. And so our group, Vote Common Good, along with a lot of other groups, started to organize. And in 2018, we launched a bus tour. And that bus tour ran in 2018, 2020.
So, you know, the issue, and they're saying here this has to do with a lack of kindness. Well, let's listen, let him get to that.
2022, and is on the road again this year. And we're talking to evangelical voters, many of who have already had their minds changed. You know, a lot of people ask us, how do you go out and change the minds of these evangelicals? And the truth of it is, we don't feel like we have to change their minds. Their minds have already started changing. I mean, to be blunt, Donald Trump is like a self-cleaning oven who does all the work for you if you want to know who he's going to be and how he's going to perform as president. And for a lot of these voters, they're just not comfortable supporting him any longer. And we know that Donald Trump may still receive 70% or 72% of evangelical support, which to
well, you know, that's not that big of a drop.
Like me, seems entirely too high. But he can't win the swing states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia.
Look at this. This is, they're getting him here.
Even Arizona, if he doesn't receive near 80% of evangelical support from white evangelical voters.
Now, you know, Pastor, I've been...
There he goes. So these guys getting it done. They love the evangelicals.
And in politics one way or the other the past 30 years or so. And I always found people respectful. And I will say even, and I've said it on the air too, that most Trump supporters are respectful when walking through airports or going to baseball games. But a lot of times, you know, there are a few that aren't. And
yeah, we saw that video where the guy was telling you to suck his poop.
I
saw a video. Some New York guy confronted him. And he's just laying it. Morning, Joe. And he's pretending to be on a phone. And the guy's just yelling at him in a New York accent, just abusive.
Tell this story because it's so shocking, because I grew up in the Baptist church.
No way. With that Gumby Doo haircut?
Baptist church.
What about her?
And
what church did she? What church did Mika grow up in?
You know, Chamblee, Georgia, in Meridian, Mississippi, mainly in Pensacola, Florida, and a lot of my friends, I'll be honest with you, that I grew up with, that I went to church with 3 times a week, 4 times a week, that I did vacation Bible school with, that I went to Ridgecrest with. I could go on and on.
And please do, because this is fascinating.
I do not recognize now. And I always tell this story, and Tim Alberta had basically the same story, but I was saying goodbye to my mom at her funeral, and her casket was 2 feet behind me.
Look at Mika.
And somebody I grew up with in church who knew my mom and knew my family, instead of giving me condolences, came up to me and said, I am so concerned you're going to hell because you're not and I cut her off.
It's, you know, you guys are definitely going to hell, like, just because, look at him. But his little mouth, like his tiny little cartoon mouth, and the big, you know, the way the beaker-like head and the hairdo here, is just so, he's such a, like, these are like cartoon characters, these guys, right? What's the hat, dude? Like, are you the cool Christian guy that wears the funky, artsy-fartsy hat?
I said, if you're about to say, because I'm not supporting Donald Trump, I want you to know, I'm going to pray to Jesus tonight that he will forgive you and that you'll find your way, because you were so lost. You were so lost to be doing that at this moment.
Okay, so this let's just move on from this. But the fact of the matter is, you know, Donald Trump is not a Christian, and he doesn't believe in God, and neither does Kamala Harris. I mean, they barely say things. You know, I heard that one thing with Kamala saying the year of our Lord, 1993, whatever it was, right? That's the only time I've heard her say something like that. Her mom was a Hindu, but she is clearly not. I doubt she knows very much about Hinduism, which is the better religion, and I've talked about that in the past, because they allow for saints to come in forever. Like they're always looking for more saints, which gives rise to a lot of fake gurus and things. But it's not a closed system. And they recognize other spiritual figures from other countries. Like the Hindu religion recognizes other spiritual, that there can be other spiritual people like Jesus and things like this. It's not exclusive. And the teachings, the ancient teachings, I mean, some of the original teachings about the soul was discovered in ancient India, things like this, right? And so, it is, to me, a better religion. And, India, in terms of its connection to God and the people there that truly practice that religion. But like all religions, it's flawed, and like all cultures, it's flawed. But she doesn't embrace any of that, right? Because she is not about... Both these people are big ego, monstrous ego people, like all these politicians, like these clowns. And, for that reason, they're not into God. So Trump is more likely to give the evangelicals, throw them a bone, even though he sucks and even though they don't like him, right? But he's still getting a majority because they know Kamala Harris is like the devil compared to Trump, like in terms of their beliefs, right? I mean, it'd be stupid for them to vote for Kamala Harris over Trump. It'd be like, self-sabotage, right? Like, you could not vote at all, or you could, write somebody in if you feel the need. Like, you don't need to vote. Like, you don't have to vote. And that would be the better of the choices. But if you're going to vote, then certainly voting for Kamala Harris as an evangelical, it's like self-abusive, right? So then this is... Trump admits he lost the 2020 presidential election.
Just months before the 2024 election, Donald Trump has finally admitted that he did, in fact, lose the 2020 race.
So when I talk about news lying, this is news lying because he didn't admit that, right? This is what happened.
To now President Joe Biden.
And I became president. And then the second time, I got millions more votes than I got the first time. So I was told... if I got 63 million, which is what I got the first time, you would win. You can't not win. And I got millions of more votes than that, and lost by a whisker.
Lost by a whisker. We should.
No, that's not admitting to shit, right? That's him saying, like, he would probably preface that by saying that he lost by a whisker, even though they cheated. Like, he left that part out, right? But then they're going with this here.
Note, of course, that Donald Trump's lies about the 2020 election fueled the January 6th attack on the Capitol, as well as multiple state and federal indictments. Joining us now, Chief White House correspondent for the New York Times.
Okay, so then they're talking about the legal case that he just admitted he knew he lost and he did all that shit, right? But he didn't admit that's not him admitting. That's a slip up. It's an unclear statement on his part. He clearly believes he's cheated, or at least that's the position he's putting out. Like, you could say it's a Freudian slip, yeah, maybe, but it's not substantial. Like, they're celebrating this all over the frickin' MSNBC and CNN. Trump sucks, but, like, come on. Like, this is why it's fake news, because, the guy, if this was Biden's multiple gaffes, if you took every one of Biden's gaffes at face value, which you guys don't even show Biden's gaffes, because you guys don't want to admit that he was senile until you did, right? And so this is why it's fake news. So this guy who really sucks, J.D. Vance.
Breaking news earlier today, big endorsement. Liz Cheney endorsed Kamala Harris.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
And it's so interesting, isn't it, that every failed warmonger in the established D.C., let's just say machine, is behind Kamala Harris. That the peacemakers are behind Trump and Vance. Blessed are the peacemakers, is what the scriptures say. Your thoughts, JD?
Well, maybe the best thing, not the very best thing, but a very good thing that I could say about the next presidency of Donald J. Trump is that he's going to make sure
Donald J.
that people like Liz Cheney are laughed out of the Oval Office instead of rewarded, because this is a...
Boom. Well, it's true that the warmongers back Biden because Biden got the neoconservatives. He made a deal with them. Like, foreign policy is run by the neocons, which is unthinkable that a Democrat would allow the failed neocon policies. Again, this is the one good thing that Trump did was he didn't support these illegal wars, but that's going to change with his support for Israel, because he's going to give them a blank check. And so, you know, we'll see. I think Trump's going to win. We'll see what happens. You know, it's out of our hands, right? So this is Tim Walz at the State Fair, and he's got his effeminate way of waving, you know. Woo, Tim!
Right, Minnesota, breakfast of champions, pork chop on a stick.
Pork chop on a fucking stick. You want to be president or vice president of the United States, and you're out there pushing pork chop on a fucking stick, right? Pork chop on a fucking stick.
I've traveled to a lot of state fairs. While Iowa has a nice one, it does not compare with Minnesota, and the pork chops here are the best.
I'm having two.
For those not from Minnesota, just to be clear, there's a lot of great state fairs.
These state fairs, like the food there is atrocious. You know, you have these, I've gone to a couple of these state fairs for these kind of Midwestern things. And the food, they have often rides and stuff. You can see the cattle and they have these different, each day they have different livestock and things. It's usually in the summer, it's pretty hot. But like the food there is horrible. It's like the worst kind of food.
In the country, this is the best one. Enjoying every bit of it, and started the day with pork chop and vanilla shake. So
pork chop and vanilla shake, breakfast of champions. No wonder you look so young and spry.
That's great.
Boom, there he is. Look at him. Let him get all flamboyant here. Hey, it's me, it's Tim. Woo, look at me wave with hands. Woo. Boom, pork chop on a stick. This guy likes to be porked. I haven't covered Jimmy Kimmel's in a while, but this was recommended to me. Adam Kinzinger is a Republican military guy who's backing Kamala Harris, and he was at the convention as a sellout and traitor to the Republicans. And this guy's having him on because of that, right?
Or our party. Were you surprised that at the vitriol that was directed at you?
No, because that's what he does. I mean, look, he's built a cult. He's really built a cult of personality.
Yeah, like that Kamala Harris thing wasn't a cult. It's two cults, right? It's two cults that you can put any... I mean, Trump has got specific cult following. Like Trump has his own cult following that Kamala doesn't have organically. They're trying to create a cult following based in some, bullshit they rolled out on the convention, right? But the Democrats and the Republicans, many millions of them will fall in behind anybody they throw out there. And they will support them and, campaign for them because the party is a cult in itself. And, it's cult-like behavior because their candidate can do no wrong. I mean, they'll support any piece of shit that they put out there, right? And, it's totally a cult, both of them.
Personality. And when you go after the leader of a cult, it's almost like going after somebody's religion, because this is what they have taken. Everything they do is built on this idea that Donald Trump's going to save America. So the vitriol is crazy. What did shock me a little bit is getting texts from old friends. My co-pilot I flew with in Iraq texting me that he's ashamed to have ever flown with me.
Boom, that must have really hurt, like right in the nutsack.
Extended family members that basically sent a certified letter, which I guess they still have, sent to my parents' house disowning me and saying I'm part of the devil's army. I mean, that's
Boom,
when
are you part of the devil's army? Like, why the fuck would you support Kamala Harris? Now, I can understand not supporting Donald Trump, but what are you supporting Kamala Harris for? Like, there's this binary, that's a cult behavior, right? Where you leave the cult and you go immediately to another cult, right? And you do it, on national stage, and, this idea that you were one of these Republicans going to Harris, right? And, of course, these people are turning on you because, they suck. But, like, you went to there's nothing good about Kamala Harris, right? I mean, as bad as Trump is, there's nothing good about Harris. So there's this little gem here.
And then Donald Trump comes along, and Donald Trump has no commitment to truth. I mean, this is the thing.
You mean Kamala Harris does? Are you shitting me? You think Kamala Harris is honest? What are you talking about? Yeah, Donald Trump sucks. So does Harris, and so do you. So does he, and so do the rest of you. Like, we all suck, and you guys suck worse. So this is the reason why I clicked on it, because they're talking about Donald Trump being smelly. Remember, the Republicans were saying Hillary Clinton smelled like sulfur. You know that? I mean, that came from Alex Jones. That Obama and some of these Democrats, they were devil worshippers and they smelled like sulfur, right? Which, you know, I found hard to believe, but you know, it was this thing that went around. And then now this.
We have that here. This is last year you wrote about Donald Trump. I'm genuinely surprised how people close to Trump haven't talked about the odor. It's truly something to behold. Wear a mask if you can.
Yeah, those masks don't work for odors either.
Now, I mean, what did it smell like specifically?
So if you take like armpits, ketchup, makeup, and a little
ketchup, boom, ketchup.
Butt, it's probably like that all mixed up.
And that's that's the Trump formula.
A little bit of a pungent odor, I would say. Yeah. You definitely wouldn't want to bottle it up and wear Trump cologne. That's for sure.
Is this
You guys are great. Okay, so that's these clowns. Jimmy Kimmel has a weird obsession with Donald Trump, like even more so than there's other comedians and fake news people and whatever it is, right? But to end this thing, end this video, you know, when they roll out an illusion, like a psychological operation, there is the idea that, okay, this is fake. Like, you have lots of people who say that now. Like, let's say Ketchupgate. So all these people say this is fake. But how many of the people who are truthers and Republicans are saying, well, Donald Trump is in on it? So they give you a secondary story. Oh, it's deep state, and they come in from that perspective, and either volunteers or paid shills will roll out this information, you know, the disinformation campaign, and fill in the gap, the void that's left by you thinking this is fake. And then they give you a secondary explanation that's just as fake and just as manipulative and even more so. You know, people on the left would say, oh, but that didn't even happen at all, or whatever. And so, like, there's, you know, something like that. Or, you know, it's too bad they missed, this kind of thing. But there's a secondary narrative that's not the mainstream media. But very few people penetrate beyond that anymore. And they just go for the, you know, the easy answer. Like, that's, you know, all these things that happen. Another example is this: well, Trump was cheated on election night. That somehow with the mail-in ballots, they rigged it against him, and all these ballots. You know, the official story from the Trump campaign, from the Trump campaign about it, right? But, you know, to say it's, like I said before, the elections aren't rigged, the system's rigged. It's the whole system. And it's not the deep state, it's not one party, it's not, you know, all these things. It's a whole rigging of the system. And the more that the system's about to implode from inflation and from, you know, debt and from moral depravity and these things, the tighter they have to control the system. You know, the narratives have to be, you know, there has to be more meticulous, the narratives. They have to, you know, hone all these things, right? And so, you know, I should say this at the beginning of some video as well, because this will get lost here for people who don't make it to the end. But, you know, you see this with this election. This thing is meticulously falling into place. The Democrats did a great job of getting rid of Joe Biden and then selling you, you know, a short sell on Kamala Harris. And, you know, it's limited. Like, they only have a short amount of time where you're not going to get tired of this, you know, this Babylonian, oh, right? So, you know, like, it's just, you know, they can prop her up artificially for like 3 months. And I don't know who they're going to pick here. But if they do pick Kamala Harris, it has to be messy because they have to keep Donald Trump involved. They have to keep, the election has to be disputed. It also weakens the president if there's a kind of contested election. You're going to have a very weakened president either way, and then bad shit's going to happen, like a lot of stuff. But if they're going to get rid of Donald Trump, which, you know, they will, they're going to have to keep him alive as much as possible. And I always thought they were going to elect him again because of that. But they can also keep him going in terms of a contested election. And, like, there's lawsuits. Because, like, why the fuck does Nebraska get to separate one electoral college vote. I mean, it's silly, but no other state gets to do that. Like, it's, why does that state get that privilege? There's something, Nebraska, they had the Boys Town thing where all these, they were, taking these kids in and bringing them to Washington, D.C. and, and putting them out at these sex parties, right? The Franklin scandal. Like, there's some things, Nebraska's a kind of, a small, ignored, I guess, Midwestern state? I don't know what you would call it. And it's a, farming state. And, you don't think about Nebraska. It's like the Dakotas and some of these other states. They don't really have a professional anything. They have they used to have a good college football program, which they no longer have. And so, the Cornhuskers, right? So, it's an interesting state where it seems to be like one of these places like Denver and Hawaii. There's an intelligence community part to it. Like, I've done no research on that, but I know that there's huge intelligence community stuff in Hawaii, and of course they have that secondary capital under the Denver airport. At least that's what's rumored, in Colorado, right? So they have these states that are like connected to Washington, D.C. in some way, where there's these big federal programs, and they manipulate things. They can do things at those places. There's places where they have a lot of mind control stuff around there, like Virginia Tech and up in Connecticut. These events that happen are around there, right? There's, near Yale in Connecticut, they have these hubs for like mind control, and they run some of these psychological operations in these cities where they have a strong influence, and they have a big, setup there, right? Whatever it is, like underground bunkers, or they have these secret locations where there's hubs for this kind of bullshit. Anyways, that's it for now. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Parvado, definitely pointing from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.